YouTube, how's it going? The Goat House is back. Today we're going through some surprising cuts that actually may happen. Very realistic for them to happen here in the 2022 NFL offseason, whether it's leading up to free agency, within free agency, or maybe some could happen a little later in the offseason. Not guaranteeing all these guys get cut. I think a chunk of these could happen. Teams tighten cap space, looking for easy ways to clear cap space, maybe have to make some tough decisions. Here they are. So we're going to be talking about some big name guys that could be surprising cuts here. We'll have all kinds of videos similar to this, all kinds of off-season content leading up and in the offseason. Already got some on the channel. We have playoff coverage as well. So join us for all that. Like, subscribe, turn notifications on me. Much appreciated. Follow our Twitter. Any link you're looking for, important, useful link there, social media or recent videos pinned in the comments. You can find it down there. Here's our Twitter. Again, a lot of important updates, talking during live games, keeping you guys involved. Polls, you guys vote for awards, players of the week, and then pick games as well, keeping you guys involved there. So check it out. Link down below. So I got about 12 big names here that could be surprising cuts. And we'll do another video week or so where we have a cut each team I think should make, so a little different, get every team involved. But first one here, the Chargers with BRYAN BULAGA. They would clear $10.75 million by cutting BRYAN BULAGA here in 2022, which is a pretty good number, pretty big number there. Was a pretty big addition to them a couple years ago in free agency at the right tackle position, which was a big need. And he's still a solid right tackle if he's healthy. That's kind of been, the story of BRYAN BULAGA's career. Very talented right tackle. Is he healthy? Is he going to stay healthy? That's kind of the problem there. So do you leave that $10.75 million sit out there and keep him just for him to, it's tough to predict obviously that to happen, but to not have him technically, or do you want to clear that good amount of space? Because to me, could say if you get rid of him, you do get that space, but you have a need at right tackle. I think you got a need at right tackle either way. You're going to have to look out for the very near future, even if you have him still, or a key fill-in guy, because he could get injured, obviously. Chargers don't absolutely have to make this move because they're pretty good in cap space. Look at a team like the Chargers, though. They're not a playoff team. You expect them to be a playoff team. You want to get there, but with Justin Herbert, you have that window, you have that opportunity to be more than just a playoff team. So, like I said, a lot of cap space, but maybe you can clear that space here, and it could help you, load up on talent to be where you want to be. So, interesting name to look out for. Next one for the Browns, Jarvis Landry is definitely an interesting name, a big name receiver here. Still would think that he has a little bit left in the tank, but kind of an off season, I thought. More drops than we're used to there, and that was kind of common, unfortunately, a common theme for the Browns receivers. And the Browns got a decent amount of space. Sure, they can look to clear more because there are some teams with a whopping number of cap space, and maybe those teams end up stealing all the big time guys. So maybe you want to clear a little bit more here. And $15.1 million is a lot. Is it worth keeping Jarvis Landry when you have that 15.1 kind of sitting there that you can bring in there, you can clear? I don't know if he's worth it based on his play last year, and that opens up the receiver need even more. It's just such a big need as it is. I don't know if it really changes it that much. It's just that big of a need. You need multiple legit receivers to help out that offense. It was a big problem for them this year. So this is one that I think is pretty realistic. Also, you can what could stop these teams not wanting to get rid of the guy, teams feeling like maybe they have enough space, they don't need to do it, or restructures or pay cuts, which is two different things. People kind of get confused on there. So it's impossible. I could predict restructures. It's impossible to predict which guys will take pay cuts. You obviously could judge off a guy's character, and that could stop with something like this happening. They go to Jarvis like, hey, we want to keep you, but at 15.1 is just ridiculous right now. So let's work on something. He might just say, release me if that's the case. But who knows? So that's definitely a name to look out for. It's a big number in potential savings there. 49ers, this is a big one here. Jimmy Garoppolo, who's their quarterback in the playoffs right now. We're heading into the divisional round in a couple days here. They're playing the Green Bay Packers. Jimmy Garoppolo and the 49ers just got a good win against the Cowboys in Dallas in the first round of the playoffs. So it looks like Jimmy Garoppolo, could be back, because he's the guy. He's the guy that got to the playoffs, the guy they trust. But they did draft TRAE Lance. They put a lot into that, too. They traded up to get that guy. and it looked like they were looking out for their future. They knew what was coming up this year, and that is the part of his contract, which is in a way team friendly. The cap hit would be, $25.6 million, but which is not so super team friendly. For quarterbacks, it's not bad, but in terms of you can actually cut him and clear that space. Not a lot of contracts out there. A lot of contracts where if you cut the guy, you lose all, you don't clear any of it, or you only can clear a small portion. So maybe they already have it, in their minds that it's Trey Lance time. We're going to cut him. We're going to free the 25.6, and we're going to build with that money. And they have some space too. Not a lot, but they have some space before that 25.6. So clearing that could definitely help them, build throughout the rest of the team to build around Trey Lance, make the roster even better, maybe an appealing spot as well. So interesting decision. I think this week plays a big part. Divisional round against the Packers in Lambeau this week. If they win that game, I'm starting to feel that Jimmy Garoppolo is back. Maybe they adjust the contract somehow. I start to feel he's back, though. If they lose, they could be moving on. Could be Trey Lance time. So it'd be interesting to see what they decide there. But I think going into this year, people saw this, were looking ahead to this moment, and they're going to cut him 100%. Now it's I don't know. 49ers are looking pretty dangerous right now with him leading the way. Obviously, he's not the strongest part of their team, but he still gets the job done there, and he fits the system, obviously. Next one, the Bills. Cole Beasley. There was some talk going into this year that he could be cut. I didn't think it was going to happen. It did not happen. He's not playing a whole lot. There's some games where he steps up big. Divisional round this week against the Chiefs. Maybe he steps up big. A very solid slot receiver still. Still is important in that receiver group, but the Bills don't have, they're a little tight on cap space. They're positive. There's much, much worse situations heading into the 2022 offseason. But they could be looking to clear a little bit more because they're that, whatever what happens this year, they're a Super Bowl now team. Go win the Super Bowl now, and that'll apply whether they win or not this year, next year. So clear a little bit of space and then make some bigger moves maybe elsewhere. It's a possibility. 6.1 isn't a whole lot of money, but they like the other receivers they got. They can add another one to the draft and maybe get maybe a more important position with that clearing that space. So it's a possibility here. This isn't the strongest one to happen because, again, it isn't a lot of money. 6.1 is kind of a lot of money, but not an insane amount. So we'll see what happens there. He hasn't been playing a load of snaps like he did maybe last year too, so that's interesting. The Giants, this is one kind of a dark horse one. I don't know. It's tricky because the Giants need a coach still. Probably depends on the coach and the scheme that they're running defensively. Blake Martinez is a fantastic linebacker, in my opinion. He was injured this year, so maybe that plays a part. Do we get a guy coming off an injury? How do we feel about him coming back? And then another thing to factor in is you clear the $8.52 million, and that's actually a lot for the Giants because the Giants are sitting right around even, which isn't ideal. We have a record number of team cap space available this year, and there's some teams kind of taking advantage of that, and there's some teams kind of like the Giants where they don't have anything right now. So they might, if they want to make moves, maybe they stay the same and rely on development and the 2 first-round picks. That's possible. It's not the end of the world, I suppose, but everybody wants to get better in free agency, of course. So you're going to have to clear space. You're going to have to make some tough decisions. Is Blake Martinez one of them? $8.52 million is a good amount. Again, no more Joe Judge. What's going to happen on the defensive side? Is Patrick Graham going to be gone? Are we changing schemes defensively? Is Blake Martinez going to fit the new guys? Are they going to rather have the $8.52 million? So he's coming off the injury. He's a good player, though. So it's a tough decision there. But it makes sense to me. If the Giants had plenty of cap space, they would very, very likely keep him. But because they're so tight in cap, where could they find ways to clear it? Kind of going through that roster, Blake Martinez, Sterling Shepard could make some tough cuts there. So we'll see. It's definitely an interesting one because it's a good player that could surprisingly become available. Packers expecting this one, actually. Preston Smith, their pass rusher, they would clear a pretty good number there in $13.72 million. I'm expecting this one. He was kind of a candidate to be traded more so this past offseason. We talked about that, and they actually, I think they tried to maybe push him out the door, couldn't make it happen. They still view him as a solid player. They just didn't like the cap number, and they reworked his deal where, they can free more space by cutting him this year. So they kind of prepare themselves for this moment. So if they cut him, $13.72 million. They have Rashawn Gary and, of course, Zadarius Smith. So they are negative in cap space. The Packers are pretty. They're towards the bottom of the NFL. They're pretty far in the negative in the cap space right now. They have to re-sign Devontae Adams, so they're gonna have to make some tough decisions, work some money around, restructure, which is good at the time because you clear space, but it hurts your future as well. People don't realize that. But yeah, so they're gonna have to find ways to clear money. Here's a way. I feel like they expected this to happen anyway. So this is one. This is actually, it's a surprising one kind of because he's a good player to be available. But honestly, it's at the point where it would surprise me if he wasn't cut, perhaps. Just the way they kind of laid this thing out this past year. And a lot of money to be saved, and they need to clear a lot of money. Chiefs, Frank Clark, their pass rusher, and the Chiefs are heading into a divisional round game. It's interesting. I was talking about this during the week with the matchups, the predictions. Frank Clark has kind of been, I don't want to say non-existent, but he's been a little quiet, heading into big games. They need him to step up. I'm kind of thinking back to the last few years. He's kind of been quiet up until the big games, and he really stands out, and that's kind of makes you think that's why he's there. So we'll see what happens here in the rest of the way in the playoffs. Big game this week against the Bills. But he could be cut because he's been a little bit let down. Their only way of, for the most part of the regular season, but their only way, it seems like, of generating, not only way, but for the most part of generating pressure is the blitz. So you want better edge rushers so you don't have to blitz constantly, So maybe, and they, surprisingly, for a loaded team with a lot of big contracts out there, they got a decent amount of space, around $20 million, maybe a little bit north of that available, which isn't a whole lot to work with. Compared to some teams got, over 70 mil available, but they could look to clear a little bit more space. And if you cut him, early portion of the offseason or in free agency, $13.4 million, you clear that. It's a lot there. You have to say, is he worth that 13.4? But you actually can cut him with the post-June 1st designation there, or wait till after June 1st and clear more money, $19.5 million. That's a lot. I think that's the key to look out for. And then it confuses people every year. The post-June 1st cuts, each team going into the offseason has two post-June 1st moves, so they can do a post-June 1st cut, trade, two cuts, two trades, whatever it may be. And they basically it's a little weird how this is set up, but they kind of tell the league, all right, we're using our post-June 1st move on this guy. And what that does is it frees them from getting hit from the extra bonuses in terms of the cap. So the bonuses they have aren't counting towards the cap there. So they actually clear a lot more money. It doesn't apply to every contract. Only some contracts this applies to. So it's a little confusing, but teams have two of those per offseason. Don't know where they came up with that, the NFL, but it's a thing. And sometimes teams will do so they actually could cut him before June 1st and pretty much file the paperwork, tell the NFL, hey, we're using our post June 1st designation cut on Frank Clark in this case. So they can do it before June 1st, but they don't actually free that extra cap space that they get, from the bonuses until after June 1st hits. But they will get that cap space. So a lot to be saved there with Frank Clark. I don't think a team would trade for him, but never know there. But yeah, a lot to be saved. So that's definitely an interesting one to look out for. I'd look out for that post-June 1st number since that's an option there. And the 19.5 is pretty significant. Another Chief player, actually, Anthony Hitchens, their linebacker, as a captain of the linebacker there on the inside. They can clear $8.44 million, so the Chiefs can potentially clear space with guys that are solid to them and they like, but maybe where they can get better at, clear all this money because they're viewed as a juggernaut team from other free agents. So maybe they want to join them, clear that space so they can make that happen. And they have Nick Bolton balling in there, so we'll see where they view if they want to keep both those guys. It feels like he's been playing less and less this year, Anthony Hitchens, that is, though. So they can clear that $8.44 million by cutting him. An interesting decision there coming up this year, offseason. Bengals with TRAE Waynes. TRAE Waynes was their big offseason addition before last year, and he was injured all last year. Didn't play it down. This year, injured for a chunk of it, playing, maybe not playing up to his contract. And they have other corners in there they like as well. So they could move on from TRAE Waynes already and clear $11 million And they got a decent amount of cap space and actually have a decent amount of ways to clear more cap space. And the Bengals are becoming this big-time team that maybe players want to play for, so clear that space and just try to build a juggernaut here that would make sense. So is Trae Waynes worth keeping around with that $11 million sitting there? Do we rather clear that? So definitely an interesting one just because it just felt like yesterday, which was before last season. So not this past free agency, but the one before, they signed him to a big contract. So it'd be a disappointing end to, that signing, but you clear $11 million there. Next up, Washington football team. Landon Collins, who also has that post-June 1st possibility there, which is almost double the amount of savings. So I'd look out for that. Anybody that has that option where there's bonuses on the table where we can clear all that as well. We don't get hit in terms of our cap with that. That it makes sense to either wait or, make that designation that we're going to cut this guy, and that's going to be our June 1st move there. So Landon Collins, who solid player, especially down the stretch of the season, made plays for Washington, but they certainly know, is he a safety, is a linebacker? That's kind of how it's going to go for a lot of these teams, whoever wants him, but they can move on. They can move on from him, save a little bit of money here. They have a decent amount of space, so it's not like they absolutely have to do it. But I don't think if it was just that $6.6 million, and that's all it was, I don't think they would do it. But for that 12, I'd say it's a possibility there. It's definitely a possibility, maybe a stronger possibility than some of these other ones there. Let's talk about the Saints. Got two for the Saints here to end the video. Saints, just like last year, they are in a tough cap space situation. They're about negative $64 million, not as bad as last year, but that's pretty bad, especially a year where we have a record number of available cap space for teams, and there's teams with absurd numbers to make moves. Saints are sitting in a pretty bad situation, so they're going to have to, once again, going to have to make tough decisions to get back to zero, get back to even, to bring guys back or bring guys in. Last year they had to make those decisions they didn't really want to. Emmanuel Sanders, interior defensive lineman, not being able to bring back a guy like Trey Hendrickson. So Malcolm Jenkins, it's a tough one because $4.3 million is not a lot, but they do have that post-June 1st move, which that would, if they were to move on from it. And that's the tough part, though, because they would have to wait to June 1st, post-June 1st, to actually get that cap space. They're going to need it before that, so I'm realizing that as I'm talking about it. So they may need to go for that just to cut them. We got to get even as we head into free agency. We need that money now, so we need that $4.3 million, and it's not a lot for a stud safety here. That means a lot to New Orleans, but they're desperate. They're going to make other moves to clear space. We'll be talking about trade candidates, but we could be talking about a trade of Michael Thomas, perhaps, which they don't really want to do, probably. They just have to make tough moves they don't really want to do. They're going to have to restructure more contracts, which got them into this position in the first place, doing that too many times. People think restructuring is pay cut. It's not restructuring. People think sometimes the cap's a myth. It disappears. But it caught up to them going into last year. You pushed all that money back, and then you have all this money, and you can keep doing it. People's like, well, you can keep doing it, but then you got to keep doing it. Instead of being, the Miami Dolphins with $76 million in cap space, you got negative 60, and you got to keep doing this over and over again. So they are in a pretty bad situation. They got to restructure more contracts. They're going to have to trade players. They're going to have to cut players they don't want to. They're going to ask around for pay cuts. That's first, and they'll probably get some. They'll definitely probably get some. But they're going to have to do a lot of work here. So making tough cuts that you wouldn't think would happen may happen here in a guy like Malcolm Jenkins. And there's definitely other options. The Saints are going to have to do a lot of work here. And there's another one here. This one I'm almost expecting is Bradley Roby, who they actually just traded for in the season, that corner. So that might be surprising to people. Like, they just traded for him. They're not going to cut him. But I actually talked about it then when they got him, that this actually might have been the plan. It might have been a rental because they needed a corner, helped them get in the playoffs, helped them make a run. So they needed that guy like that. So let's trade for him. And they traded a bit away to get him. So it's going to be tough for people to see them cutting him. So I'd say this is either a possibility of this happening or they get him to take a pay cut. They're really gonna push for Bradley Roby to take a pay cut. Does he think he can get more elsewhere? I think it's a possibility. It's, like I said, it's a strong possibility they're going to do something with him. I also think I won't say strong, a possibility he's back on the Saints, even if a move is made. Even if they cut him, maybe they re-sign him, because the $10.8 million is just too much. Too much sitting around there, and you can clear the full thing when, again, they have negative $64 million around that range cap space. Well, they don't have cap space. Basically, they're negative. So they're gonna have to make tough decisions like this. I'm pretty sure the plan was that it was a kind of a rental for now. Let's see if we can work with him. Pay cut, rework deal, cut him, clear that money, sign him back, backload it. I think that's a possibility there. I think that's a possibility where they cut him, clear that 10.8, and like, hey, coming back. You're coming back. We'll give you a decent amount of money. We'll put it in the back end. Or they're pretty good at developing corners, obviously. Maybe they feel the Paulson Adebo is coming along pretty well, and they have Marshawn Latimer, so I know they value having multiple solid corners out there, but they're so good at developing the corners and having them play at a high level that just move on and then clear that 10.8 and then maybe draft another guy. They worked with Adebo so well. So it's a guy to look out for sure. Again, the Saints are going to have to make a list of tough decisions because of the situation they're in. There's a few teams like that. The Saints are definitely got the worst situation this year, though. So, and that'll wrap up this one. That's all the kind of the big name guys. There's definitely more that'll pop up, surprising ones that'll be even more surprising. But we always do a video where we go through every team in a cut. I think they should make they should make it, see how much, maybe it's a smaller move, maybe it's a bigger move, and then we always go through every team and a signing they should make in free agency. So videos like that, a lot more of them, more than just that, are on the way for the offseason, along with NFL draft content and a lot more playoff coverage right now, of course. If you're looking for those recent videos, there's a ton of informing ones, good ones on the channel right now. Like, subscribe, turn notifications on while you're at it. And there's links directly to them pinned in the comments as well, along with our Twitter. So pretty important stuff down there. Check it out. But that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.